Welcome everyone, Mark Posto here from Uphill Athlete. I wanted to take a few minutes today and talk about Denali clothing systems. It's March, it's a time when a lot of people are going through their last minute packing details for spring expeditions, and I wanted to share some ideas for clothing systems that I've experimented with over 15 seasons of guiding on Denali. When I think about clothing for Denali, I kind of think about it in primarily two ways. One, you want to have a system that keeps you warm in the harsh Arctic environment of Denali, but you also want to have a system that's quite flexible. Denali is such that it's extremely warm on the lower glacier at times, and it's really important to have a system that can accommodate a lot of different temperatures and needs while you're moving during the day. I will also get into gear a little bit, but mostly just going to focus on clothing systems for today. And we'll also try and leave some detailed choices about individual items that I like in the notes below. So the first thing I want to start with is with socks and footwear. For Denali, I bring 3 pairs of expedition weight socks. I alternate 2 pairs every other day so that I always have a dry pair to wear, and I reserve the 3rd pair for summit day. I think that it's quite important to have a clean, dry pair of socks for summit day to maximize your ability to keep your feet warm on the coldest day of the trip. Some people will also wear a thin synthetic or wool liner sock to add warmth and to keep their outer sock a little drier and cleaner throughout the trip. I don't think that's strictly necessary with modern high quality socks, but you may want to experiment with that as part of your sock system and do some experimenting at home with your expedition boots. Make sure that they fit well and have a good plan for socks for your Denali trip. The other piece of footwear that's nice to have around camp is a pair of down booties. There's several different manufacturers. These are a very light pair that I take on certain expeditions. I think Western Mountaineering down booties are an excellent choice. I like to not bring a super bulky pair of down booties, although they're warmer and nicer around camp, because I like to be able to pull the liner out of my boot when I get to camp and have it drying, and be able to stuff my down booties inside the shell and wear them around camp if the weather's inclement. So I think a down booty that's a little bit on the medium to minimalist side, you can wear inside of your shell around camp is an advantage. For boots, there's a couple of different choices. This is a Sportiva G2. This is a double boot with a removable liner. It's a warm trim boot, but it is a boot that you would need to wear an overboot on Denali. Like a 40 below purple haze would be a good example of an overboot that you would wear with this. That gives you a flexible system, but bringing the overboot is an added thing to carry, and there's a little bit more difficulty in adjusting the crampons for that system. So this would be a good choice for somebody who owns this kind of boot that doesn't want to purchase a second expensive pair of expedition boots, or maybe for a later season trip where it's a little warmer. Alternatively, there's a triple boot or all-in-one expedition boot. This is the Olympus Mons Cube. Scarpa and Mie also make similar versions of this. This boot is a little bit overkill for the majority of the Denali trip, but it is a very simple system and it will ensure that you'll have warm feet on summit day. So this is a system that I've gone to over the years and I think is worth the investment, particularly people that might have aspirations for Himalayan peaks and can get some other peaks climbed with these boots, which are somewhat expensive. There is a choice to be made in the crampon system depending on which boots that you use. If I'm going to use a double boot with an overboot on summit day, then I'll typically use a semi-automatic or hybrid crampon system like this one from Black Diamond that has a heel bail but is a strap on the front. Because this is adjustable and will work well with these boots with or without overboots. Alternatively, for the all-in-one boot like the Oli Mons, I tend to use a fully automatic crampon. You just need to make sure that your boots have a fairly aggressive toe bail and that they clamp on there well. Not all crampons work and play well with all different kinds of boots. So if you have a particular kind of crampon that is not fitting on your boot the way that you would like it, then experiment with a different brand, because some fit on there better than others. But this has been a good combination for me over the years with regards to boots and crampons. I do think with regard to crampons, it's important that it fits well, and I also think it's quite important that you spend time getting competent at putting your crampons on and taking them off. It's something you do every day. It's not easy in that kind of environment. So practice at home, practice barehanded, and then work up to gloves, work up to your heavier gloves, and then even practice putting them on with your mittens on, so that, you know, when you're getting ready in the morning, that's something you already have a pretty high level of competency at. So now I want to cover some thoughts about clothing for the lower body. I bring 3 sets of underwear on a Denali trip, and then long underwear and soft shell pants. Some choices here you might want to think about are relevant to how heavy your soft shell pants, and I basically think there's sort of 2 schools of thought here. I bring a single mid-weight Patagonia Capilene thermal weight long underwear, and a sort of a mid-weight soft shell pant. This gives me some flexibility. I can, you know, wear the long underwear in cool conditions, or in warmer conditions, just wear the pant without long underwear. Alternatively, some people like to bring a silk weight long underwear bottom, a mid-weight long underwear bottom, and then a thinner pair of soft shell pants, so that they have some more flexibility in warm conditions lower on the glacier. I do think that for people that wear double boots and don't wear triple boots, they might want to consider tie downs for deep snow conditions instead of gaiters on their soft shell pants. But this is a good flexible system. One thing that I used to bring that I see people they're still on gear lists sometimes, are a really heavy pair of fleece bottoms. I tend to not like a really super heavy fleece bottom as a long underwear layer, because once you've put those on in the morning and you have your harness and boots and crampons on, you're quite committed to that layer for the duration of the day. And if conditions change and it becomes warmer, then you're sort of trapped in those fleece bottoms, and it's quite uncomfortable. So I like to use a single layer system with my long underwear, pants, and then use a puffy pant that I can add or remove as I need to for warmth as the day goes on. You also want to bring a Rainshell. I think this is a good place to be thoughtful about weight. I don't tend to wear the Rainshell bottoms a lot. It's primarily for wind if it's super cold, but it's too warm to wear your puffy pants. They are nice down lower where you can actually get rain, or where the snow precipitation might be such that it's still heavy and moist. And if you're digging around camp, like at the base of Ski Hill or at the 11,200 foot camp, it is nice to have a hard shell layer on your lower body for working around camp. I do think it's important that this is a full zip bottom, so that you can add or remove it during the day without having to take off your crampons or your boots. And then my final lower body layer would be the puffy pants. This particular pair is a Mountain Hardware compressor pant, and this is the pant that would go on over everything in quite cold conditions. I think that it's nice to have a synthetic lower body layer, because these do run a higher risk of getting damper when you're digging around in the snow. So I don't like to have down for my lower body layer. And I also think that some of the 8,000 meter weight down lower body layers are overkill for a Denali trip. So I like a mid-weight synthetic puffy layer, and I think that this hardware compressor pant is an excellent option. The other major feature that you would want to have with these is you also want these to be full side zip, so that you can vent them, but also you can remove them during the day or put them on at a break if conditions change and you need to add warmth. Or you can start out with them on summit day, and if conditions heat up, you can remove them without having to untie. If you do have occasion to put these pants on during the day, you also can run the clip-in point through the fly over your harness if you end up putting them on in the middle of the day and want to stay clipped or tied in. So I want to talk a little bit about upper body layers now. I think this is one of the hardest things for people and the sources of the greatest confusion. There's a lot of really nice products that have come out of the soft shell genre, especially for expedition climbing, but it does muddy the waters when you're trying to streamline your system and bring the minimal number of layers to do the job. So I'll give you a little rundown of what I might consider bringing on a Denali trip. First, for women, a sports bra. I think that it's important to have something that's comfortable that you can sleep in, but I also think that it's really important to have something that works and plays well with the backpack. The packs are heavy on Denali, and push on your back and shoulder rub is a big deal, so find a sports bra that works well for you in that way. Then against the skin, I like to use a t-shirt. I like a thin wool t-shirt. It tends to do a little better over the duration of a long expedition and smell better, and it dries quickly. So I use a wool thin t-shirt. This is a Patagonia, but there's quite a few models out there that makes a nice base layer for folks. Then this is a sun hoodie. This is also a fairly thin layer, but has a hood, long sleeves, and provides you a lot of sun protection, particularly on the lower glacier. This is a bit of an optional item in your clothing system, but I think that it's worth the wait to bring it. There's a lot of times where on the lower glacier you're in the direct sun, you're getting reflection off the snow, and sunscreen is just not enough. So having a light layer that you can cover up with is worth the wait for carrying it. Then I like to go to a heavier insulated base layer. The long time standby for this layer would be the Patagonia R1 Hoody. This is an example of that. I think a couple of features you want to think about with this layer is I think it's important that it has a chest pocket. There's a lot of times where you need to keep things from freezing or thaw things out, and just keep it in your jacket pocket's not warm enough. You need it to be closer to your skin. And so I think having a chest pocket is a really key feature on an inner layer like this. You may want to also have a thin hood on a layer like this. You may not have the ability to dig out a hat all the time when conditions change, and having a thin hood to pull on some of your layers is advantageous. This is another example. This is a Voormi Access NXT layer that I've been using. Again, chest pocket, so that you can keep items warm, like your cell phone with batteries, or thaw out things like snacks in cold conditions. So I would bring one of these two layers as part of my system. For my first mid-weight insulation layer, I like to use a Patagonia Nano-Air jacket. This is a full zip jacket. It's an insulated synthetic item. It has stretch in the insulation and in the shell. It's a really comfortable piece of clothing. It's nice to have next to your skin for long periods of time. I cover my pillow with it so that it's nice next to your face. And it also has a chest pocket for keeping things warm when you need to. Just a little less close to your skin than the R1 would be. I think this is a really nice item. It's forgiving of a wide range of temperatures, and it's pleasant to have on over the course of a long expedition. One thing that it's purposefully not is it doesn't block the wind very well. So it breathes well on its own, but I like to use this in conjunction with a light wind layer. So this is a Patagonia Houdini wind layer. I think this is a really key piece of clothing in this system. This happens to be a Houdini Air, which I like, which is just slightly more breathable. But I've used Houdinis since they first came out on Denali, and I think it's a really nice addition to the system. So when I'm wearing this, I keep this handy. If the wind picks up or it gets cold, then you add this on top of the Nano-Air, and it blocks the weather a little bit. So I think it's important to size these such that you could get the Houdini on over the Nano-Air and have that be comfortable. It's a little bit redundant, but I also do bring a hard shell jacket on Denali. Particularly on the lower glacier, much like with the bottoms, it could rain, it could snow in warm conditions where it melts and you're getting damp. So I think that a hard shell, at least down lower, is a good addition. This is a Patagonia Storm 10. I think that shell gear is a good place to try and save some weight. So don't feel like you need to bring a really heavy 3-layer Gore-Tex shell. 10 or 12 ounce shell a lot of times is plenty. And this is an item that I do bring, and I do think is worth it on the lower glacier. I don't always bring this up high. When it's cold up high, I tend to add puffy layers for warmth, and not a shell gear. So this might be a layer that I would leave at 14,000 foot camp, for example. This is a Patagonia Micro Puff. This is another more shelled traditional mid layer in the puffy range. I think this is a little bit of an optional layer. I've certainly not brought this layer as part of my system, but if you're someone that doesn't run super warm, if you're on an early season trip, I think this is a nice system with the Nano-Air and then a Micro Puff to be put generally over it. So this needs to be sized to go over the Nano-Air, and makes a nice flexible system that can keep you warm traveling during the day when your warmest puffy jacket might be overkill. So I think this gives you some flexibility for those changing temperatures higher on the mountain. And then finally, your down parka. This should be a very warm item. You're going to wear this around camp when it's cold. You may well wear this on summit day if you get a cold summit day. I do think that a lot of the really heavy 8,000 meter parkas are a little bit overkill for Denali and don't work as well in the system. You have plenty of insulation to go under this. So I like about a 25 to 30 ounce garment weight parka is my outermost layer. I think some of the 35 to 40 ounce garments that you'll see are unnecessary weight. It should have an attached hood that doesn't come off. It's permanently sewn on there. And I think that it's nice if it has chest zips on the outside, and then also on the inside of the garment, it's nice if you can have pockets so that you could keep a small water bottle in there on summit day to keep it from freezing. So this item, I think it's important that it is also sized correctly so that it fits over all your other puffy layers. If this is too snug, it will compress the puffy layers under it and you won't be as warm. So think of not only what the proper garment is, but think of the sizing so that you can layer these and wear them all at once and have it make sense within your system.
So
now I want to talk a little bit about hand wear. I think there's some important points to be made here, and there's a lot of confusion because there's many different glove systems. So I'll go over a system that's worked well for me over the years. As my lightest layer, I bring a light liner glove. This particular pair is wool. It could also be synthetic. I don't like it to be super fleecy on the outside, so a soft shell or something that has a fairly trim finish so that it doesn't collect snow unnecessarily. This can be worn under one of your bigger gloves like your mittens to stay warm, but I also use it a lot for sun protection on the lower glacier. Then I like to bring a lightly insulated leather work glove. These are Kinko's. A lot of the guides wear these. There's several different versions of this, but this is a fixed insulation garment or glove that is very durable. So when you're working with ropes, when you're shoveling, it's something that is going to hold up for the length of the expedition. And it's also something that's not too warm, but is warmer than the liner glove. So I actually wear this glove for about 80% of the trip. Because it's just the right level of insulation for the conditions. I do think that it's important with any leather glove to make sure that it's been waterproofed, especially down lower where the snow may be wet. If you're doing chores around camp, you don't want it to absorb more moisture than necessary because then it's just harder to dry out. So I would recommend waterproofing these right before you go on each trip. And this is a glove that if it does get a little bit damp, like your other gloves as well, then you'll sleep with at night to dry out. My next heavier weight glove for me is the Black Diamond Guide glove. This is one layer more insulated than the work glove. It has a removable insulation so that you can pull the insulation out and dry it separately than the shell, which I think is important on these heavyweight gloves. If they get wet and have fixed insulation, they get quite hard to dry out. This is a glove that you probably won't wear that much on the lower mountain, but ideally you could wear this on the upper mountain. So you could move to 17 camp in this glove, and ideally you could summit in this glove. One of my goals with glove systems is to not wear the mittens if I don't have to. Obviously, if you get a cold day and you need to wear the mittens, absolutely, that's what they're for. But if you can wear these gloves in a variety of conditions, that just gives you more dexterity. And on the upper mountain, especially with the move to high camp and the summit day, there is a fair amount of work to be done with clipping and unclipping pickets, and so you need a little bit of dexterity. And so I think a glove is much more adept at that. So I encourage folks to find a nice, warm, well-insulated glove, and then to practice with it and get good at manipulating carabiners, putting their crampons on, doing those things with their heavyweight glove, because that's likely going to be the scenario on the summit day. Black Diamond does make a lobster mitt version of this same glove. These gloves are identical. This is just a lobster version. If your hands do run particularly cold and you know that this is not going to be adequate for you, then you might consider the lobster mitt. This is not quite as warm as a true summit mitten, but it does give you much more dexterity. So you might be able to get away with this on a cold summit day and not have to go to mittens. So this would be another option. I would bring one of these two layers as your warm glove choice. And then finally, I bring insulated summit mitten. I don't bring a super bulky summit mitten that has a removable liner. This is an all-in-one garment, and it is lighter in scale. It doesn't have a lot of leather on it. It has nylon on the back of the hand, and primarily you're going to be carrying this much more than wearing it. So I don't like to bring a super heavy, bulky mitten. I also find that with the heaviest double layer mittens, once I put them on, I'm almost incapable of doing anything that needs dexterity with my hands. And then I'm constantly having to remove the mitten, and then my hands get cold. So I like to bring a little lighter weight mitten. These Marmot ones have worked well. Black Diamond Super Light Mitt works well as well. And this is also something that I'll put a hand warmer in on summit day if it's particularly cold. So a lot of times I'll start an extra set of hand warmers. I'll put them in my mittens and put those in my pack, even if I don't intend to wear them. And the hand warmers are cooking away in there, the mittens are warm, and then if I do get into a situation where conditions change and my heavyweight glove then is not warm enough and my hands get cold, I can switch to the mittens, and the mittens are pre-warmed. The next category I'd like to talk a little bit is about headwear and things you would wear from the neck up. One of the most important things I think on a Denali trip is some kind of buff. I use this mostly for sun protection, but up higher you also can cover your face in wind. And for anything you're going to cover your face in, I trim a small hole to align with my mouth so that I can breathe through the hole if necessary. Down lower, when the exertion level is a little low and you're wearing it primarily for sun protection, you can turn it so that the hole is towards the back and cover your face and nose with the solid fabric. And then up higher, when you might be breathing harder, or particularly if you might be wearing goggles and they're steaming, then you can align the hole with your mouth so you breathe through the hole and you exhale the moisture through the hole, and it's much less likely to steam your sunglasses or your goggles. So I actually bring two of these buffs, and I have one around my neck all the time, and commonly have it over my face if I'm in direct sunlight. I also bring a face mask for windy, cold conditions up higher on the mountain. I like this particular kind because it's not a balaclava. It attaches in the back with Velcro, so you can put it on or take it off very easily during the day without having to take your hat off, without having to take your helmet off if you're wearing a helmet at that point. It has a neoprene fabric front where the wind protection is necessary, and then a fleecy lower part to go against your neck. And again, you can see here that I've cut a small hole directly over your mouth so that you can breathe through the hole and not steam up your goggles. For hats, I bring two hats. I bring a ski hat. I think it's nice if this hat layer is fairly light. You don't want it to be too warm. You can always put one of your mini hoods on if it's extra cold, but you also want to be able to wear it layered under a helmet, and certain conditions. So I think it's nice to have a mid or a lightweight ski hat. And then I bring a ball cap that I pretty much have this on from the time I land until the time I fly off the glacier. That's really helpful for blocking the sun, and also you can trap your buff up underneath the back of it to help hold your buff up. I think it's simpler to use a buff and a regular ball cap than I do one of the integrated hats that has flaps for sun protection on your neck, but those are also quite common on Denali. Sunglasses. Dark sunglasses for sure. A lot of people have gotten away with normal high quality sunglasses as long as they're fairly close fitting, but a good glacier glass is more common. I think also a nose guard for people that are sensitive to the sun is super important. This particular pair has an integrated nose guard, but there's a variety of Velcro strap-on nose guards that Bico makes that you could put on any number of regular or glacier sunglasses. This is also an item that you wear a lot, so it might be worth investing in a prescription sunglass if you require prescriptions and you're not going to wear contacts. And then goggles. On Denali, I typically wear goggles much more commonly in stormy conditions than nice conditions. When it's sunny out and you would want a dark goggle, in general, you can get away with a high quality pair of sunglasses. So my go-to for my goggles is a very light colored lens, either a yellow or this is a rose tinted lens that would provide a lot of contrast for seeing in low light conditions where navigating might be difficult on the glacier. So this is the standard lens that I wear. A lot of goggles, this one as well has a interchangeable lens, so you could bring a dark lens as well and change it if needed. The only real occasion you would need a dark lens would be on a clear sunny summit day that was extremely cold and windy, such that you wanted to keep more of your face warm or you were worried about your corneas freezing with a pair of sunglasses. So it is valuable to have that option. It's rare that I actually end up going to a dark lens. I'm much more commonly wearing the light, high contrast lens. It seems one of the consistent problems on Denali with goggles is people having them steam up. So I've been experimenting, this is a Jolbo goggle, and it actually has a system where the lens pops out from the goggle shell and can ventilate. So I've had good luck with this, so this might be something to look into. I think it's called their Superflow system, and they also make a goggle that has a photochromatic lens that changes in different light conditions. So I think this would be a pretty ideal goggle for Denali type trip to try and minimize that moisture fogging up your goggles and give it a chance to vent. And then finally, helmet. The helmet actually doesn't get worn a lot on Denali. I typically wear it around Windy Corner, and then I wear it on the fixed lines going up to the 16 ridge. So it's in your pack or in your duffel more than it's on your head. So a lightweight helmet that is reasonably comfortable, but is durable getting banged around in your duffel bag. And I think this Petzl one is great for that. So now quickly I want to talk about a few things with regards to backpacks and sleeping systems for Denali. For backpacks, the long and the short of it is you need a big pack. A lot of times on the lower glacier when you have a sled, you actually don't need that much volume in the pack. But for the move to 14, certainly the move to 17 and coming back down the mountain, you're single carrying a lot of gear and you need a big pack. The good news is there's not that many options, so it streamlines your shopping a little bit. This is a Hyperlight product of 5,400 cubic inch. This is kind of the most minimal and lowest volume you would probably want to go for a standard Denali trip. There's also a couple of good options. The Gregory Denali 100 is a popular pack and great for a Denali trip. And then the Mountain Hardware AMG, I think it's a 105, is also a good pack for Denali. So trying to get away with a small pack on Denali ends up being frustrating because you're constantly trying to fit a lot of things in the pack that don't want to fit. It's just a much easier thing to bring a pack that's adequate for the job and carries well with the kind of weight that you're going to have to be carrying on a Denali trip. The sleep system is pretty streamlined on Denali. I like to use this Thermarest Neo-Air. This is a Neo-Air X Therm. It has a little higher R value for cold sleeping conditions. I think this is a full-length pad, and I think is a lot of warmth for its weight and bulk. It trims down to be pretty small in your pack. There's also some other good insulated options out there, but I think this is a good, on the minimalist side, but a good quality option. Everyone will also want to bring a foam pad. This is traditional ridge rest, or there's a Z rest that's a very similar product. This is to be layered usually under your inflatable pad. It provides some extra R value for sleeping on the snow, but this is also a really useful item for sitting in the snow. You bring it into the kitchen when you're dining to sit on the kitchen bench, and it's good to bring back and forth from the tent to outside. It's not going to get punctured. I also recommend either this ridge rest or the Z rest because they're actually fairly slick, and this ends up spending a bunch of time in the snow. It doesn't collect snow. Avoid an open cell foam or anything that has texture that's going to collect snow in the field. And then sleeping bag. This is a Mountain Hardwear 20 below bag, which I think is adequate for almost everyone for a standard Denali trip. A lot of people will bring a 40 below bag. I think a 40 below, given the clothing system that you have and the options for sleeping a little warmer, is overkill for most people. But if you sleep particularly cold, you might want to consider a 40 below bag. There also are some excellent sleeping bags like in the 15 below category from Feathered Friends and Western Mountaineering. So if you're somebody who sleeps quite warm, particularly if you have a late season trip, you might be able to get away with a really high quality 15 degree below bag. But I think this 20 degree below bag is a good place to start for most people.
One.
So I want to just touch briefly on gear for Denali, and this is not going to be an exhaustive discussion, but just a few points to think about. First, with harness, because of the glaciated nature of the trip, you're going to have your harness on all day, every day when you're traveling. So I think it's important to have a harness that's quite comfortable, but also a harness that works well under your backpack. There's a lot of interaction between the waistbands, belt, harness, and then the waist belt of the backpack that can make it uncomfortable on your hips. So this is a Marmot harness that I've used over the years that I quite like for Denali. This is a Zephyr. Petzl also makes a really nice harness, and Black Diamond makes a good harness for Denali. I think the most important thing for these harnesses is that you don't have to step through the leg loops. You want this to be the style of harness like a bod style or diaper style harness that you can unclip and then you can put on over your boots and crampons without having to step through it. So find something that's comfortable, somewhat minimalist under the waist belt, and that's easy to put on and off without having to step through it each time. Ice axe for Denali. If it's a West Buttress trip, I tend to go with a very minimalist ice axe. There is a lot of low angle terrain, so something that's the appropriate length. You know, a lot of times a little longer ice axe like a 65 or 70 centimeter axe is going to be appropriate for someone who's tall. This is a Camp Corsa Nanotech that's kind of on the lighter side, but I find for a West Buttress trip this is perfectly adequate. An ascender. There is some fixed line work on Denali. I think the biggest thing with the ascender is that you're well practiced with it. It's primarily the thumb that actuates it, so make sure that you're familiar with your particular ascender. I think these Petzl ones, which are kind of the standard, are great. I am a little more dexterous with my right hand, so I choose a right-handed ascender that I would actuate with my thumb. But whichever one you choose, get well practiced with it. Practice with light gloves, practice with your heavy guide gloves, and maybe even practice with your mittens so that you can get adept at that. And that will be a great time savings when you're traveling up the fixed line. For carabiners, most folks will bring something on the order of 3 or 4 lockers and about 8 or 10 non-locking carabiners for their, depending on how they set up their glacier travel system. I like to use a little bigger locker as part of my clip-in system on the front of my harness. So I bring 2 slightly larger lockers for that. And then I also like to use a locker to attach my pack to my sled haul so that that couldn't inadvertently come unclipped if things were to get twisted and the sled moves around quite a bit. So I choose a very modest light locker for that because it doesn't have to do much other than stay there. And then a lot of the non-lockers that you use, you're not clipping and unclipping and manipulating that often. You're clipping things in at the beginning of the day and maybe unclipping them at the end of the day. So I think a lot of your non-lockers can be of the smaller, very lightweight variety and save a little bit of weight there because they're not something that you need to manipulate much during the day. Trekking poles. Most of you will probably use a collapsible, commonly maybe a 3-section pole because you might be flying and those fit into your duffels much more easily. Make sure that they have full-size snow baskets because you will very likely encounter fresh snow, and something that has a minimalist or no basket is not very useful because it just disappears into the very deep snow on the glacier. So make sure that you have proper snow baskets and that that the lock is in good shape. So for the last section, I want to talk a little bit about some miscellaneous items that you might find helpful on Denali and some specifics about what to bring. Toilet paper and a mini hand sanitizer in a Ziploc bag is nice. Most people start out the trip with actually 2 rolls of toilet paper. Some Gold Bond medicated powder, and I also like to bring some single serving baby wipes. They come in individual packets. As opposed to a big bulky package of baby wipes, because in cold conditions the baby wipes will actually freeze and now you have a big icy brick which is hard to thaw out, whereas the individual size baby wipes, you can put one like in the pocket of your R1 hoodie and defrost one at a time for use. I think a medical kit is a good place to think critically about what you're bringing, because it's a place where I see a lot of people bring unnecessary items that they just carry up and down the mountain and added weight. But I do think a good roll of tape and some items to take care of blisters are worth bringing. Certainly the other members of the party might have some things, but if numerous people have blisters, then you can run through your supplies pretty quickly. So I think it's nice to have your own setup that you're used to be able to address blisters, particularly on the lower glacier. Earplugs, particularly up higher on Denali, it can be quite windy and the tents flap quite loudly. So I think earplugs are well worth it to help you sleep well at night. Sunscreen, obviously. I actually don't go through that much volume of sunscreen on a Denali trip. You tend to wear a lot of clothing, so you're covered up with a physical barrier. So it's mostly on your face that you would wear sunscreen, and I'm able to cover up with a buff quite a bit. So I think a single 2-ounce tube, something of this order, is adequate. It's another place that you don't need a giant tube of sunscreen, and you can save some weight there. A watch. One of the primary things that I use a watch for on Denali is the alarm function. So make sure that you have an alarm that you know how to use, so that when you decide on a common time to get up in the morning, everyone can set their watch and wake up. This is a Garmin InReach Explorer. This is a satellite texting device. There's a slightly more current one called the InReach Mini, which is also great. And I think this is a really nice piece of technology to bring for someone who wants to stay in touch with the family or communicate with the outside world while they're on Denali. This pairs with your cell phone, and so you can text on your phone like normal, and it's a fairly unobtrusive but efficient way to stay in touch with the outside world on a Denali trip. Camera, this is a Sony RX100, which is a great little camera. I've seen a lot of folks bring big, heavy cameras on a Denali trip because there are some great photographic opportunities on Denali. However, it's not an environment that's particularly easy to take photos, and when you're on a group trip, you're moving most of the time, so that there's not as many chances to shoot as you might think. So I encourage folks to either use their cell phone for photo opportunities, or bring a somewhat more modest pocket-sized camera and save some weight there. Hand warmers. hand warmers do work fairly well at that altitude once you get them going. I primarily would use these on summit day. I bring 3 pairs of hand warmers. I sort of bring one for an emergency, and then I bring 2 other pairs to use on summit day. There are times that you start out on summit day because it looks good and the weather changes, you have to turn around, so you might have a second attempt at the summit. So it's nice to have multiple pairs of these. They are somewhat heavy though, so I discourage folks from bringing 8 or 10 pairs of hand warmers. I think something on the order of 3 pairs is probably adequate for most folks. Water bottle systems. The sort of gold standard for Denali is 2 liters of water carrying capacity. So a lot of people will bring 2 1-liter Nalgene's and some kind of insulated cozy. There's an outdoor research cozy which is quite popular. This is a 40 below bottle boot, which is neoprene. I like the 40 below product because it's a little trimmer in your pack. It's not as thick, but also it doesn't involve a zipper. And any time that I can eliminate a zipper out of my system that's a point of failure, I think it's great. So this is a very simple product and will keep your bottle from freezing in most conditions. I like to use a half-liter water bottle also. I actually use this as my hot drink bottle, and I have another one of these 40 below cozies that go on it. So there's a couple of choices to be made here with a water bottle system. Some people will choose to go with a 1.5 liter big bottle with a cozy, and 40 below makes a great fat big bottle that they make a cozy for, and also a half liter, so that you have 2 liters of total capacity there. This could also double as your hot drink container, saving you from bringing a separate mug. So there's a little bit of volume in your pack to be saved there. If you don't bring a second water bottle and a mug, you just bring a second water bottle. For the cup, bowl, and spoon, first of all, I think it's nice to have a light stuff sack to keep everything that you're going to need to go to dinner or breakfast in the kitchen in. So you can grab 1 item out of your tent and go to breakfast and not forget any items. So I bring a small stuff sack for that. I bring a Lexan spoon, which are quite durable up there, and then a plastic bowl. There's a number of these products. Some people just go with something that they found at the grocery store. This is a Rubbermaid product which has held up well. I've got a little insulator on there to keep my food warm and to be able to set it down in the snow. There's also a mug called the Fair Share mug, which has a screw top lid, which is quite popular on Denali. It has a handle, it's about the same volume. So I encourage people to bring something fairly rigid and durable like this. There's a number of foldable or collapsible bowl products that you could use for conditions like on Denali, for long duration trips, and where you're going to be eating a lot of things like soup that are liquid. I find a rigid container like this to be worth it. And the foldable silicone bowls inevitably fail at some point or are more difficult to deal with. So I think it's worth a little bit of weight and bulk to bring a hard-sided container. This is also an insulated mug for hot drinks in the morning and in the evening. And again, you could eliminate this and just bring a ½ liter with the cozy to drink your hot drinks in the morning or evening. And then the last miscellaneous item that I think is nice is a large dry bag. This can be a very lightweight dry bag. This is an outdoor research product. Sea to Summit also, their ultralight sil nylon bags are great. This is primarily going to be a bag that you're using for caching items as you're moving up the mountain and double carrying. So it doesn't need to be heavyweight. It can be quite light, but it's nice if it's got a fairly big volume. And I think somewhere between 25 and 35 liters is adequate for most folks. You want to be able to get your extra lunch food, some clothing layers, your helmet, sometimes your crampons in there. And you want to put your crampons in a crampon carrier of some kind so they don't poke a hole in it. But if you can get those items in here, then you can put 1 item in the cache, and it's much more efficient when you're caching and digging up those items to just grab your bag. I would also write your name on here so it's quite apparent whose stuff is who, and try and choose a bright color so you can easily recognize it from out of the cache. Thanks for tuning in to the Denali Clothing and Gear Chat. I hope that you found it helpful. I'll leave some notes in the video description below with specific items that I like to bring and I've found useful. If you'd like more information about what we do at Uphill Athlete, go to uphillathlete.com, where you'll find training tips and other things helpful for your mountain adventures.